Hello and welcome to the Ways to Change the World podcast. I'm Krishnan Guru Murthy and we're in an unusual location this week because we're at the Web Summit in Lisbon in Portugal, which is an enormous tech event. Tens of thousands of people have descended on this city and one of them is my guest today, Imogen Heap. How did you start in music?
So I think the reason why I started in music was because I'm a middle child, and as a middle child you're like really vying for attention, and we have a big grand piano in our house and it's the loudest thing that, the loudest, most attention seeking thing in the house. So that's where I went, and I taught myself the piano, but my dad and my mum, they played a bit of piano. My brother also taught me the blues scale and kind of set me off on an improvising tip in that department. And then I realised that music was really my friend. It was the thing which kept me a companion through some difficult times. But then in school, I realised, okay, so my piano lesson, when I got the piano lessons, take me out of some other academic class.
Good, yes.
So then I'm going to learn others and then I can get more. So then I learnt the cello and the clarinet, and then I did extra theory. And then I really just wanted to understand the orchestra. I wanted to understand all the different parts of the orchestra and try to write for them, because essentially I wanted to write music for orchestras. That was my childhood dream. I thought I'd have my own jumbo jet and I'd be flying around the world and premiering things at the Sydney Opera House and the Royal Albert Hall. But I didn't get to do that until about 7 years ago. It's just been a long route to get
So you
there,
were
really.
always thinking big. I mean, you were never content just to play a tune on the piano.
No,
It was like, give me the orchestra.
Yeah, I really wanted to just get my hands on lots of sound and noise and make a big racket, yeah.
And so what was the dream? Did you want to be a pop star?
No.
Or a
No,
conductor? Or
that was an
what
accident,
was it?
really. I really wanted to make music. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't care in what, I was lucky enough that nobody was like, you have to do this, you can't do that. I was just always encouraged to do what I love, and I'm really grateful. And I also, was with my dad, who has his own business, so the concept of working for somebody else was kind of alien to me. And my mum, just, crazy lady, does her own thing as well. And so this concept of, you do what you love, and that's it. So I just always did what I loved. And then when I was 12, I discovered that computers could help me get those orchestral things that I wanted to get out of my head, but that I would actually be able to hear them, and so would other people, because I'd be able to type the flute line and the cello lines into a keyboard, and then I'll be able to hear them back, because no 12-year-old is going to get an orchestra. I'm not Mozart, unfortunately. So that was a real great a turning point for me, because I realised that this computer was a real friend to me. And then I just kept writing music, and I did end up writing songs because I wasn't really that popular at school and I couldn't really get along with anyone when I was at boarding school. So I wrote a lot of songs because I didn't have anyone to express that stuff to, which inevitably did end up making friends, because then people heard the songs. And we do what, makes us kind of feel connected to people and understood. And that was the way that I connected with people. And then when I was 17, my manager, who was then my manager for another 20 years after that, he kind of kept chasing me around the Brit School, because I went to the Brit School because I wanted to learn about recording real audio, because I couldn't do that at the boarding school, and it was a free school, so it was like, go back and live with my mum or dad, or like go to the Brit School and it's free and go and live with the family. So I was like, that sounds good. So went there, learnt about the studio and did some demos, and then my manager at the time heard them and kept chasing me around going, I want to hear some more songs. And I didn't understand the concept of a manager or even the record industry, even though I was at the Brit School. But back then they didn't talk about music industry stuff. It was like the second year it had ever been, there. And so I thought he just fancied me. So I just kept running away from him. And later, obviously, it transpired that, no, he was interested in the songs, and that he had the concept of that I could make music records for a living and do songs. But that was never my intention. I just wanted to make music. I wanted to go to the study at the Royal College or something.
But have you never really been able to decide what it is you like doing?
No,
because
quite the contrary.
you sing and write and produce and engineer and do all of those things.
Yeah.
And you collaborate and you work with other singers.
Yeah.
Aren't people supposed to go, this is what I am?
Well, I think most people don't really want to do that and be stuck in a place for the rest of their life.
I mean, in music, you usually have people who are one thing or another, don't they? I mean, you're unusual in that you straddle so many different things.
The biggest contributor to me being able to to go where I want and to do the things I want and not be confined to a specific set of small things that I do, because that does get extremely boring. I've toured, lots of times. I've made a few records all by myself, and it just gets a bit and so, but the biggest reason that I can do that is because I haven't made it. I haven't, in the eyes of a taxi man, ever made it. I'm not famous, and that is a great gift, to be able to make music and have a living with making music but not be famous. Because if I was, then I would have to do that. I would have to do the same thing. I'd have to reach another threshold, because I would only have time to go and keep that rat run going, make the next record, do the next big tour, go up and up and up and up and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually you can't, and then you hit rock bottom, and then what do? Because you don't have a fail-safe.
But you're famous enough to have Taylor Swift as a fan.
Well, Taylor Swift, discovered some music of mine, as, a few people did. And actually, I have a lot of music fans, like music maker fans. I would say that in music, probably everyone knows who I am. Like, who's a musician would know who I am. But if you go out on the street, nobody knows who I am. But that's great.
So you love that, yeah?
I love that, yeah, because I get to work with the people I love. I get to, make a living from what I do, because I get to work with other people who do make money from streaming. But also I get invited to, make music because I have a huge back catalogue, because I've had lots of time to develop that, because I haven't had to keep up with the Joneses and do all that stuff. So, yeah, I've just been able to go and follow the passions that I want, and when something isn't working, I don't have a huge juggernaut behind me that I have to keep going. I can just change. I can just go, oh, now I'm going to do the gloves. Oh, now I'm going to explore generative and reactive music. Oh, now I'm going to go to China for 3 months. Oh, now I'm going to go and do this thing with this Indian musician. Like, that's the gift.
Why is a musician here at Web Summit?
I often ask myself the same question at like 4 a.m. Why am I here? I'm here because I believe in a better future for music makers, for music itself. We're listening, and we're in a golden age for listeners, but maybe it's time to have that golden age for music makers too. And I think with this technology of blockchain, combined with artificial intelligence and discoverability and better curation, digital identities, linked data, with all this combination of incredible tech, we have the potential to really create a flourishing in the music industry like never seen before.
You're going to have to explain all of those words you just said. So what is the basic problem that you want to solve in the music industry?
Okay, well, there's so many examples of the inefficiency of the music industry. I'll just give you one. So say the other day, I'm on tour at the moment. So I was in Iceland, and I was there with a DJ. The DJ didn't have any of my songs on his system, which is quite shocking. Like, a radio station, you should imagine, should have the access to all of the music in the world. Like, I know that's not a reality, because they'd have to host a lot of stuff, and they haven't got that type of money to upkeep that database. So there's one problem. It's like, how do we enable people who should have access to music to be able to do that simply and quickly and swiftly, and acknowledge the right people and get what they need? And then the other side of it is, how do they pay me? So I was there in the room. He didn't have a song of mine. He played it off YouTube, but he still played it on the radio. So there is a mechanism for me to get paid via YouTube, via lots of different people in between that payment, and it might take 2 years for me to receive that money, and it'll be like
it's a tiny little
nano amount, which will have cost the system way more, like 1,000 times more than it actually would have ended up in my pocket. And the thing is, up until recently, there wasn't really a solution to that, but there is now a solution, where we talk about this idea of shared databases, authoritative data being directed into a data set where multiple people can author into and have the capacity to do that and to change that, but everybody sees the change. So essentially, you could in the future have a mechanism whereby that radio station in Iceland, when he plays that song from a database that he doesn't have to upkeep, and they don't have to pay like thousands of pounds a year to try and keep that robust and good and correct, that they can access an open database of songs, and that they have the license to play that piece of music and then that song pays everybody at the same time. It could still
instantly.
Pay them. Yeah, it's for a smart contract. So 4 years ago, we did a little experiment where I just got a bit fed up of the situation. I was like, I can't just put another song out and add to the woes of bad data. What about I just don't release it? I put all this information up on my website around the song, and I had a little experiment with people who are interested in developing music and at the intersection of blockchain, and just said, okay, here's all the information, here's all the musicians, here are all the splits. What are you going to do with this? And a company called Ujo worked with us to develop the first smart contract for music for a song. So when people downloaded the song, it distributed the payments to all the music makers to their crypto wallets in an instant. That doesn't seem like rocket science, and it's not rocket science. It's just because of the way that the music industry has been developed over 100 years, from when radio was relatively simple and they had live performances, which is why in the US you don't get payment for the performer, because the performers would have been maybe paid at the radio station back in the day, or maybe not, just for the privilege of being on the radio, but they would have had to pay for the songs.
How did you, a musician, know about blockchain?
I like hearing about things which are going on. I've got musician friends who are also, aware of what's going on. We get invited to lots of kinds of different events just to kind of sometimes just be the entertainment. And as a result, we get to go to conferences and we hear about the technology that's out there. I mean, my first invitation into this different world, because as a musician, when I was younger, like for the first kind of 7 or 8 years in the music business, I was very kind of in a bubble, in the music industry bubble. I knew about bands that were around me, I knew about the label, I knew, that was the world. I wasn't introduced into like the world of nanotechnology or geothermal or whatever else was going on at the TED conference that I first went to when I was like 23. And then I discovered all these amazing people doing incredible things, and I was just so blown away. And then from then, my passion for technology, and I just like, whenever I can, I try to read The New Scientist and just keep abreast of what's going on. But a dear friend of mine, she's a great inspiration to me. She's called Zoe Keating, and she was invited to go and play the cello at a blockchain summit on Necker Island, which was hosted by a company called Bitfury. Bitfury build these huge machines to churn algorithms to basically create the truth of when something has happened. We can say that this thing has happened, so then we're going to put this into the block, and then the blockchain continues. So they built these massive things, and they're in Iceland and places where it's cold because they've got so much heat emanating from them. Anyway, so when she heard me lamenting about releasing this new song, and she said, you should check out this thing called blockchain, because they're talking about distributed ledgers and the idea of how healthcare could be benefiting from kind of public-private permissible blockchains, where you could have doctors and all the NHS and whoever access to your data when they need it. So say you're in an accident, they want to know if you're like allergic to strawberries or whatever it might be. My sister's allergic to strawberries, or you're penicillin. Where do they get that data? You might not be wearing your band, so you should be able to have this data accessible when you need it, because it could be life or death. And Zoe herself experienced, the death of her partner due to cancer, and incredible just amounts of stress during the end of life, where they had to literally transfer health payments between one hospital to the other. And it's insane, So how can we help data be distributed and create the permissions and security around that so people can get stuff when they need it?
But that whole approach to problem solving is very unusual. The world, it seems to me, is sort of divided between people who will play along with technology when it becomes mainstream and reaches their lives, and can they can be convinced that this is good, that it's worth having a mobile phone, or it's worth joining social media, or whatever it might be. And those people like you, it seems, who hear of something and go, oh, what could we do with that? Why are you innovator?
Why me? I think it just comes to a point where you've just got so irritated by something after so many times of the same thing happening over and over and over and over again, like not being credited correctly, not being paid when you feel you should be, not seeing the transparency in the value chain to know when your next paycheck is going to come, just not being able to really be a part of your own industry, not being data empowered, not being able to author into anything. You have to go through other people, and that means like another barrier and so much of your time. And I just spent so much of my life with admin, and I just got sick and tired of it. I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I should be making music, but I'm doing this.
You mentioned, you thought the manager just fancied you at one point. I mean, can I ask you about being a woman in the music industry first, and then it'd be interesting to talk about being a woman in tech as well.
Yeah, sure.
What was your experience of sexism and leery men and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a very kind of exactly what you'd expect growing up in the 90s in the music industry, like what we hear. And but because it was all around me all the time, and I didn't have any other experience in any other business, in any other life. I was just 17, went straight into the music industry, and that's how it was. So I didn't think anything of it.
How was it when you say that's how it was?
It was like, of course, you like had to look a certain way, and I wasn't aware of it. I was completely unaware of it, until much later in life, when I was like, God, that happened, and God, I can't believe they did that, and God, I totally didn't realise, it was a real eye-opener. And actually it happened at Portcullis House, because Vanessa Reed, she's the head of the PRS Foundation. She brought a bunch of women together to talk about, what it's like to be a woman in the music industry. And before I got there, I was like, well, nothing's ever happened to me. It really annoys me when people talk about these problems that females have had in the music industry. I've never experienced that, but it was so ingrained in me that I was completely oblivious to it. And then when I heard these women talk about what happened to them and the things that they'd had to face, and I was like, God, I was welling up. I was like, that happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me. But I just was oblivious to it because it was just so ingrained. So
what sort of things do you mean, what happened to you?
Just like very inappropriate behaviour with a very, young adult. And that, just not knowing where to turn, like making a record in the middle of nowhere, no managers or anyone around, and you're making your first record, and you get presented with a very difficult situation, and you don't have anyone to talk to about it, but also it just kind of is normal. And so you just think, oh, that's just part of it.
Because there's such a power dynamic in the music industry, isn't there, in terms of, what people can do for you if you're a new artist.
It's becoming less and less. And actually the difference in the shift is that a lot of people are kind of clued up into why they don't want to have a major record deal anymore. And why actually, that fame game is something that they don't want to achieve. Because really we're in it, well, I'm in it, a lot of musicians are in it because they love music, not because they want to be famous. If they want to be famous, then, well, good luck to you. I really would never want that. So yeah, I've seen some pretty nasty things, and I'm just very glad to be in a position now where I don't have to deal with any of that. If somebody like the 17-year-old me could hit an app, and a friend of mine came up with this idea, it's called Press Pause, and it was just, we were having a sharing in we do these events for the Featured Artists Coalition in the UK, where I just invite musicians to come and talk about the problems that they've had in the music industry. It's called Horror Stories. And on this one particular one, a lot of women just started talking. This is before the Me Too. It was like just before the Me Too movement. We were like ahead of our time. And Lucy said, what you need is like an app that you can press. Like, it's called Press Pause. And if you ever get into a situation like that, you can like press it, get out of the situation, just say, I need the toilet or something. Go out of the situation, speak in your problem, and music makers would hear your problem if they had the app open, and they could say what I would say to a 17-year-old me was just tell him to go away.
Swear, it's fine.
Okay, tell him to fuck off. Tell him to fuck off. Don't stand for it. And actually, what will happen is the opposite of what you'd think. I think he would have been deeply embarrassed, realised that also it was very ingrained in his life as well, and I think he would have been deeply embarrassed and said sorry and changed his ways.
And how have you found the tech industry by comparison?
I've so far had, again, kind of good experiences, but I am also aware of the fact that I haven't got funding. That, I see other people, and I don't know if it's because they got better ideas. I mean, for this project.
Right.
Just in life, like, project for the funding for the gloves, funding for the Creative Passport, funding for the various projects I've done, charity-based projects, whatever. Just never got really any funding. But I look at other people who are men who have got funding, and I'm wondering, is that because mainly there's male investors who want to invest? I don't know. But actually, this time, it's. I feel like I'm in a really like perfect time in history where there is the Me Too movement. There is like real active. Trying from conferences to create that kind of equal visibility of male and female to get into the into the speakers and on the panels. So I'm also getting invited because I'm in that time. So it's a combination of things that's really helping right now.
Now the gloves, you've mentioned them a couple of times.
Yeah.
What is it and how did it come about?
Yeah. I started to wear these microphones on my wrists because then I could go around and start to record, percussion or drums or guitars or the string players over there or the vibraphone player, and then record them. I'd run back and press record, and then but I needed something so that I could just record on the fly, but wouldn't stop me from my performance. So, I was like, my hand. I could just close my hand. If I could find a way to close my hand and open my hand, and that would be record and play, then I have that in my hands and I don't have to stop doing anything. I can just continue, I can just stop play, and then I could just move my hand left to right, and I could just move the sound left to right, and at the same time be singing, at the same time be in front of the audience. And so I just went on this crazy trip trying to develop this system that eventually I thought it would probably take me like a few months, but it's still 8 years on. So it basically means I'm wireless, I'm fluid, I'm able to be up and about, and I've got all of these different potentials at my fingertips. And actually now the biggest problem is just overwhelming choice, kind of stifling in a way, like, oh God, I can do all of these things, and you get lost down rabbit holes. And now I have to figure out how to create limitation, and that's quite fun too. Like, I'm only going to create song where I'm only using this effect because it's very, because people get it when it's simple, and effective.
I suppose with the gloves, I mean, because it's your show, and as long as you've got some gloves that work for you, then that's going to be okay, even if you don't end up selling thousands of them to lots of other artists and children and whoever else might want them. With your other project, though, the sort of the Creative Passport, this way of making the music industry work quickly and for musicians, that's dependent on everybody buying into it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I have a thing here which you can see, which is what we call the Creative Passport. This is a physical embodiment, and you can look at online, mycdfmusic.org/creative-passport, if you want to look, and you can see all this data. So it's got like stuff like, my profile image, that if you were a service you could have access to and know that it's a good image that you can use, that you don't get into licensing problems. You could, scrape a biography that's relevant and current, instead of, as a music service you spend 10 minutes per profile trying to conjure up something from the web that is probably not relevant to me right then. So I could save them a lot of time and money to do that. You could link in your current projects, your skills, your interests, essentially to not just help the music industry with that missing 50% of royalty potential income to music makers that never reaches the right people because they can't find them. We can not only help with that, but we can actually help a huge other array of services and potentials for people to find you for other types of work. Because my bread and butter, okay, I do make money from a bit of streaming if it's like a Taylor Swift song that I've done, or a Jeff Beck thing, or somebody who does sell records, or Ariana Grande recently covering a song. But for my own work, my bread and butter doesn't come from streaming or from even live or physical sales at all. It comes from writing music for a play, getting a commission from a brand around a collaboration with a piece of technology, or giving a workshop or a private show for somebody who's just really wants you to come and do a certain type of piano performance with the gloves. So all of that is where my money comes in, or a sync in film and TV or something like that. And so how do we help the music industry? How do we help create a layer of data, a collective layer of data from all the individual music makers, where they can share their skill sets and their passions and their projects and their calendars potentially, where people can find them to do specific jobs?
I mean, you could, everybody could have this, though, couldn't they? I mean,
Yes.
This technology could apply to the whole world.
Yeah,
for every
absolutely.
industry.
Every person, yes. I mean, actually, Tim Berners-Lee has a project called Solid, which is around that you host and retain your data about yourself. But that could be also descriptive data, not just like your passport information.
So why is this secure? Why do I not need to worry about my data being stolen or misused or tampered with?
This isn't live yet. We haven't figured out everything. You know, in order for us to do what's on the roadmap, it would cost probably millions and millions of pounds, and that's not something that we can do because we're not going to get VC funding for this. Then it becomes a for-profit thing. Then it becomes something that's not true to what we need to do, which is to keep that money within the community. So we have to start organically, slowly, music maker to music maker, step by step, do what we can see in the headlights. And that's what we're doing on this tour. We're like travelling around the world.
Signing people up one by one?
Well, we're like, first of all, we're going, this is why it's necessary. And then on the 9th of December, we're going to have a little app that's a test flight app. It's not even like an official app because that costs money and time too. And try to rally together maybe a couple of hundred or 1,000 or 10,000 musicians who just get it. They get like, and they're willing to spend a bit of time around downloading an extra app and just putting their flag in the sand, just going, here I am in the world. I'm a music maker. I believe in this change. This is my location. And maybe that's it, you know. And we start to show on the globe when music makers come online, and we show their name and we show where they are in the world. And this idea that then each music maker then verifies another music maker. They say, oh yeah, so I would go to Zoe Keating, yes, you're Zoe Keating. And then I would also say to Guy Sigsworth, oh yes, you're Guy Sigsworth. And he would then be able to verify Madonna. Well, lots of people would be able to verify Madonna. But essentially it's creating a web of trusted data by the individuals claiming responsibility for who they bring into the network, because this is our space. And you know, if this is your only home, you're not going to sully it. You're not going to, you know, say yes and kind of say you did things because it's going to look bad on you. This is your identity. This is, you know, your creative self.
And why aren't you going out there trying to get venture capital funding for this?
It's just a waste of time. And it's so incredibly hard, and I just don't have the energy for it. And I'd much rather spend the time, you know, touring, which I have to do anyway. I'm doing a, you know, music tour and a tech tour. And it's also about meeting those. I've had thousands of emails in the last 3 or 4 years since I talked about this idea in Forbes. And that's actually the reason why I'm even here, is because I just got an incredible amount of like, oh my God, this is amazing, you have to do it. Or, you know, or where can we sign up? Or I want to download my passport. You know, it's like, it's not here yet. I was just sharing an idea. And it's taken over my life. But it's really, really what I want to do, because now I just don't want to exist as a musician in the world until this is up and running, so that when I'm 50, I can just get back to making music. Well, I probably have some other project, but I can put a piece of music online and I can put it up there one time with all the data that's true and correct, and know that that song is 24/7 going to be just doing everything it possibly can to meet the people that it needs to meet, to bring income back for that song. I even want to get to the point where, you know, a natural disaster happens somewhere where I have an affinity to, or I personally feel I want to give money to that particular cause. I want to be able to send a message to my song via my creative passport and say, okay, all of the income for this song now generate to this, send to this charity.
So, I mean, well, this sounds like a really exciting time then. I mean, if you're on the verge of sort of launch, well, it's sort of a soft, not even a soft launch, is it? It's an experiment.
It is, yeah. No, I'm very excited. You know, people kind of get maybe disappointed by like, oh, it's not happening yet. Oh, so all these things you've been talking about, that's not really real yet. And I'm like, no, but I love talking about things when they're in the process of it.
And I suppose you can do this because you have these very successful commercial things like Harry Potter.
Yeah, that is a big one, yeah.
That will keep you going. Tell me a little bit about that, because it's just out now.
Yeah, it came out a couple of days ago. Yeah, so my last biggest project that was really amazing to get a friend of mine, Stephen Hoggett, he's the movement director for the play, and I was pushing Scout through a muddy field.
That's your child?
That's my child, yeah,
yes.
About 4 years ago. She's 4 tomorrow, actually. And he was like, Imogen, I'm working with this play, and they're just loving your music, and it's just, we're workshopping it, and it works brilliantly. Am I okay to carry on? I was like, what is it? What is it? He said, I can't tell you, but it's about a boy with a scar. And I was like, okay. So I looked it up online, and I saw Stephen Hoggett and Harry Potter in the play, and I got very excited. And I'd never put those two together, but it really does work. There's a world of Harry Potter which is like in its own space. It's got its own time. It's a world of its own. And then you've got my music, which doesn't really sit comfortably on any kind of playlist. It is in a bit of a world of its own because I've been left to my own devices and not had to play the fame game. And I've done so much work. I've done like orchestral pieces that nobody's ever heard. I've done huge orchestral lengthy things and choral pieces and so much stuff that I could draw from, which they needed because they've got 2.5 hours of music that I needed to do in about 6 months, as well as being a new mum. So yeah, had a lot of back catalogue to go through, and they just took me under their wing. I was in the theatre seat for like 3 months, just sat with my headphones on, my little mini studio, and I had like 2 secret weapons, one of them being Alexei Michalek, who's my assistant, and he was working at my studio, making sure that I got all the stems of my back catalogue organised and ready for me to go, all kind of in tempo. And then I had this thing called the Box of Tricks, which was before I even knew about Harry Potter. I was developing this thing called the Box of Tricks, which is a set of virtual instruments of musical instruments that I love and use in my studio. So I basically had, in the theatre seat, the ability to play my mbira, to play chords of my vocals, body percussion, like really beautifully recorded vibraphones and cellos and cocktail kit and whatever else I had in my studio at my fingertips, like as if by magic. Because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to make everything sound like Imogenified in about half a second, and neither would anyone else. Because Martin Lowe, who's the music supervisor, also did some arranging, but he could just take my Box of Tricks and make it sound Imogen Heapified. It's
really interesting that you talk about Imogenified, because I wanted to ask you about Taylor Swift as well. I mean, and how that worked, because I was listening to your music this morning, and as the father of a 13-year-old who's mad about Taylor Swift, I suddenly thought, I can hear Taylor Swift in your music.
Right.
I can hear that she's been influenced by you.
Right.
And do you see that? Do you hear that?
Other people say that. I think it's like people say that your child looks like you, but you're like, no, they don't. No, I can only see my child. And I think it's the same when people say they've been influenced by you. You say, no, that I don't see that. You don't see yourself in others, because it's just so you. You can't see yourself, if you see what I mean. So yeah, but it's great.
But when she came, because you worked with her on 1989. Yes. Did you, when you saw her singing or her phraseology or whatever, did you think, oh, I recognise that? Or
no, the reason why it came about was she did an interview in Billboard, and she mentioned, they said, like, who would you most like to collaborate with? And she said me. And that was the first I heard about it. My manager at the time got a Google alert and was like, oh, Taylor Swift, Imogen Heap, right, got to get on this. He went to the show at the O2 with his daughter, who's a huge Taylor Swift fan, and was like, look, I'm Imogen's manager, would you like to work with her? And he was all doing this while I was busy in Iceland doing a photo shoot or whatever. And then he called me up and he's like, Taylor Swift wants to work with you on Sunday. And I'm like, what? I'm just going to be landing back from Iceland? I know. And I spoke to my, soon-to-be boyfriend at the time, then father of Scout, who said, go on, do it, it'll be fun, it'll be great fun. And kind of laughed, actually, saying it'll put our child through college. We weren't even pregnant at the time. We were only literally just dating, but it's funny how things work out. So yeah.
Because it will.
Basically, yes. Yeah, exactly. So got back, Taylor Swift was at the door in the morning looking immaculate. I was looking like death warmed up. And she had a little idea of a song that she played to me on the guitar. And I was like, that's brilliant, let's just go and make it. She was like, what do you mean? I said, in the studio downstairs, let's just go, let's make it. And so I don't think she kind of realised that we could do that then and there. And we went down and I just played a load of instruments. And when she kind of wasn't looking so sure, I stopped playing that instrument. And when she was really loving it, I played more of that. And then, yeah, we finished this song, pretty much like 90% of it. We even managed to have lunch and dinner at the same time. She was writing all the words and all the melody. I honestly didn't write the words and melody. But I did help, I pulled the music together around it, and we discussed like a bit of direction here and there. But really, she actually wrote the song, and I brought the music around it.
And what did you make of her as a musician?
Very talented. I mean, it's very, I learned a lesson that day, because I was like, right, we've been going around the same chords for a while now. Now, in my music, I'd be like, right, there needs to be 10 middle eights to make up for the fact that we've been repeating the same chords for however long. So I said, okay, what about we try something a bit different for the middle eight? And so I played a few chords and, a bit off kilter. And she said, Imogen, I think we're going to lose them at this point. And I was like, that's why you sell millions of records and I don't. So I said, yep, okay, I'm going to listen to you. I forget that. And instead, we basically, I kind of created a change in a different way. We just pulled out the drums, and it was really effective. So, yeah, she's really force of nature.
She knows what she's doing.
She does, yeah.
She's entered politics sort of now, hasn't she? Have you noticed?
I have, yeah.
Are you surprised by that?
Bit. No, I'm not. I think it's time, when you reach a certain point in your career where you feel you're comfortable to share your own views, where you're not worried about, you become at a certain level where you're not worried about losing a record deal or you losing a certain fan base or whatever, because you're like, this is more to me, this means more to me, this is about my future, it's about our future. And I think when you can, that happens when you reach a certain level of success. You feel you can do that because you're not afraid of what might you might kind of stop a career as a result if you haven't reached a certain amount of momentum in your career yet. And I think we see that with a lot of musicians. They do that after a certain time.
If you think across all the things you do, is the unifying thing that you're potentially going to change the world, starting by solving your own problem?
Certainly not. The intention is to I'm going to save the world, I'm going to change the world. But often when you're making music, often in everything that we do, where there's one person experience as a frustration, there's often multiple people experiencing the same thing. So it is a lot of energy that goes into this, but it is a much better energy when you feel you're contributing to something that many people are going to benefit from than just yourself. If I thought that it was just going to be me benefiting from this, there's no way in a million years I'd be spending hundreds of thousands of pounds developing these things. It's just not worth it. So yeah, I suppose the thing which gets me out of bed is the camaraderie. It's the, we believe in this too. My team, incredibly long-suffering team, they believe in this. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't, for relatively little pay, I suppose. So, yeah, I think it's all of that encouragement, and it's when somebody else says, "Do you know what? That's a good idea. I want to have that too." That gives you the energy every day to know. Okay, so it's not just me. It was the same thing when I started making records. I found it incredibly hard when I was just making a record for me. But when I kind of had this concept of the fans out there waiting for a record, and that I started to blog and talk to them, then that's when I got the energy to make the record, because it wasn't just all about me. So yeah, it's I feel very happy, and I get a lot out of solving a collective problem.